Welcome to this week's Desk Side Chat. Our featured guest for this week is Corey Keating. Corey, appreciate you joining us this week.
Thrilled to be here, man.
Excited to have you. And a lot of people in our community are familiar with you, Corey. We may have a few, hopefully new people that'll catch this podcast. Could you provide just a real quick background on yourself so people can get a lay of the land on your expertise and where you're going to be able to help guide us on this topic this week?
Yeah, sure. So, a quick high level 30,000 foot view of it is I'm a content creator and brand creator for financial advisors and boutique investment managers alike. I work with, a handful of boutique investment managers to help them build marketing programs and create content. And I do similar on the FA side of things as well as consulting. So that's a really high level view of kind of what I do.
Nice. And in the topic this week, you and I talked about it a little bit, and this is something that comes up. So the topic specifically is simplifying your messaging. And, a lot of that, that we can go a lot of different ways with that topic, but with you, I'd like to, steer and stick with marketing. And, it's something that, it seems like attention spans are shrinking. It's more important to get a message out as concisely as possible. I guess in your mind, how have things evolved over, let's say, the last several years in terms of the importance of really honing in and having a very simple, direct message?
Yeah, I don't know that if we want to say attention spans are shrinking, I don't know if they have shrunk, if they are shrinking. Like, I don't know the details around any of the studies around that. I can only speak to my consumption behavior and the behavior that I witness others doing and exhibiting. And I would say that getting your point across quickly is probably in your favor more so today than ever before, considering the amount of noise we have to compete with in the world and all the things vying for our attention. So whether or not our attention spans have shrunk, that's probably up for debate. But what is not up for debate is, I think we can all probably agree that we want to consume things quickly to preserve our time to move on to other things.
You have a background specifically in the industry and in marketing. Is financial services, do you look at it as, a different animal when it comes to trying to get attention, or the type of people, or do you see it as just another industry just trying to vie for people's attention?
When you say type of animal, walk me through that a little bit. Help explain where you're going with that.
I guess, simplifying messaging around this topic. One of the big challenges in the industry is you have a lot of noise, hot air. A lot of people want to talk, and in some ways you can even say it's purposefully confusing to the end client, to a lot of the noise that's out there. So I guess in your mind, do you see our industry as being unique in terms of having a more difficult time simplifying messaging?
Yeah, that's a good question. And thanks for reframing it a little bit. I don't know that our industry is doing anything necessarily on purpose to confuse anybody, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of flexing going on based on, I went to Wharton, I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I've got 23 years of experience managing global assets data, right? There's a lot of that, I think, that has gone on. And I shared this with you back in February when we talked, and that was a terrific conversation, because I think what happened is this industry, the top players, the whales in the industry, set a standard many years ago, and everyone since then has been kind of copying that, and that has trickled downhill, and it's just become how we teach people in this industry from the jump, right? People get out of college and they get into the industry, whether they get in on the BD or the FA client facing side, or they get in on the investment management side. They're kind of taught this buttoned up professional view of things from, the monsters, the Templetons, the BlackRocks, the American funds, the top 6 firms that have been doing this thing for 60 years or whatever. That's how people, I think, are taught. And what I would say is, and what I'm seeing is, there's a there needs to be a evolution or revolution taking place from the ground up of saying, we don't consume content that way. We don't consume messaging that way. We consume it from the human level up, the ground up. And I think that's where there's a real opportunity, especially for the folks who are in this room or who watch this, the FAs, right? That's where I think there's a tremendous opportunity for all of you to turn this thing on its head and communicate with your prospects and clients a little differently. Does that make sense? I went on there for a minute.
No, that does make sense. And I think you're right, is you have these stalwarts, the industry, kind of setting the narrative, people feeling that they need to hone in. And sometimes this comes down to compliance or, issues and constraints that might be
I don't think so. I got to
user.
interrupt you on that. Like, I'm watching golf this weekend and this is no joke. We're preparing food for the kids. I don't know if it was Saturday or Sunday, had kind of getting an early start to things, and golf was on in the background, and my wife's in the industry as well, and she heard the commercial and she was like, is that so-and-so firm? Right? It piqued her interest because she's in the business, and it wasn't. It was totally different. It was Pack Life. It wasn't the firm she thought it may have been. But the point is, they all sound the same and they all put the same commercial out, and that has nothing to do with compliance. That's a check the box, let's try to speak to everybody with our plain vanilla. And I think that is what this industry has really done to a disservice for itself. Like, I think if the industry took a more direct approach or more niche focused approach to the topics they want to address, I think they'd do a much better job with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And, if you look at, sometimes it comes down to just risk management. I don't want to say the wrong thing and step out, not just compliance issues. So, from a ground up standpoint, for the people that you see who are doing a better job, what are some of the consistent things that you're seeing from, let's say, end advisors in terms of trying to turn this narrative on its head?
Consistency, right? They're showing up consistently where the folks that they want to do business are hanging out, whether that be LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube. They're showing up consistently. They're showing up in a human-centric form. Consumability is a word that I run with all the time. Like, is it consumable? Is the message you're putting out consumable, or is it a 4-minute run-on about why work with you as an advisor because you're a fiduciary, this, that, and the other that everyone talks about? So consistency, human consumability. Is it creative enough to get people's attention, or does it blend in with everything else? Right. So there's all the different variables that I make it sound so simple with a lot of the clients that I consult, and I'm empathetic to them leaving those meetings feeling like it sounds simple, but it's not easy. And I work with them and I really try to educate and hold their hand through the process, because consistency sounds easy, but to be consistent with a message that is consumable and creative enough to get people's attention is very difficult. So there's all the variables that go into what, we want to talk about a simplified message, right? How do we just create a simplified message? Well, it's actually not that simple. You actually have to practice and get good at it and test and try and learn and see what works and what doesn't, what flops and what takes off, right? So there's all the different things that I think go into a really good simplified message, which is kind of a juxtaposition, if you will.
And with the advisors that are, showing up consistently, doing that human messaging and maybe having some creativity around it, what areas should advisors be honing in or focusing on in terms of how the message is being delivered? Do you see any unique benefits or differentiators from video to written to blogging, podcasting? What would you, I guess, look at and see as being the way to maybe try to do all those things at once?
Yeah, you're not going to do them all at once. And I think you're going to overwhelm yourself and do nothing if you try to do them all at once. I think the best advice I could give your folks and the folks watching this and listening to this is you got to kind of know yourself, right? And let's start there. Like, are you charismatic? Do you feel like when the camera turns on, you can share a message succinctly and get your point across, and not have to rely on a teleprompter, or, like, you're comfortable, right? Can you turn a camera on and comfortably deliver a message in less than 60 seconds? Or are you more comfortable maybe keeping the camera off and just using the microphone, right? And maybe audio is kind of your thing. Or maybe neither of those come natural to you because you feel like you run on too long, and it's just that's part of your personality. You just go too long. So maybe written is the way that you should be consuming or creating. There's only so many ways people can consume your message, video, audio, written word, that you got to kind of find your lane and which one comes most natural to you. And that's how I work with my clients. Frankly, the first conversation is like, what are you most comfortable doing? And let's start there. And we'll have from whatever we identify as that medium, we'll take the conversation from there.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, that goes to the human side, right? Be yourself, lean into what really can set you apart, I think is important. But, some of this too, going back to some of the industry norms, the traditional way of looking at things, have kind of set a certain narrative. As you're working with your clients, Corey, how much do you try to push the envelope on somebody who, maybe they do look at, they're better off written, but you start to realize, hey, this they could actually get up in front of a camera. So how do you help advisors, your end clients, maybe push the envelope in terms of maybe discovering some things that they may not have been as apt at performing in the past?
This is a fun one. I mean, it's a fun question, and good job for you on asking it. It's really kind of the game of the rhetorical question. Like, John, how do you consume content? Would you rewatch that? Tell me a little bit about your consumption habits. Tell me about the last client you brought in, right? So that's a big one for an advisor, is they come to work with me, they get in a place of feeling like I'm pushing them in a direction that they maybe don't buy into or don't believe in. And then I say, well, how did you even find me? Like, well, I saw you were showing up on the LinkedIn feed. I decided to do a deeper dive. I checked out your YouTube channel. It seemed like you were having the conversations that it was almost like you were speaking to me. You were answering the questions that I had. And I was like, this just makes sense to reach out to this guy. And you have a personality that seems to jive with mine. And I'm like, this is exactly why we're going to do this for you and for your prospects, to bring in new clients, because you're going to jump on camera. You're going to answer the questions that they have. They're going to see you on camera and learn about your personality and see that they're already a natural fit, so that when they do reach out to you, you've skipped the first two meetings because they know you, they already want to work with you, and they know what you do. So you don't have to introduce yourself.
So, back to simplifying the message, and I guess maybe we can hone in on, specific mediums, but generally speaking, what would you, in your mind, what is a call to action, or what is something that people should be putting out that is going to retain an audience so that they don't get turned off, that it's not pushing too hard, but there is some meat there. There is, something behind it. How do you strike that balance in terms of, again, our industry, we're always coming from the sales mindset of there's got to be a call to action. There's got to be something there. Again, generally, across all mediums, how do I find the right balance in terms of quickly and succinctly getting my message across, but then having that meat as far as what the next step might be in working with me?
I mean, I would stop focusing so much on creating content and a message around what you do, and just beating people over the head with why they need to work with you. I would do that. Like, I always work with my clients to establish their who, what, where, when, why videos and content, because I think that's evergreen and a staple that you should have, right? Like, you should always have those 5 pillar videos or pieces of content somewhere that someone can easily find, that explain who you are, what you do, why you do it, right? How. So that stuff I always encourage all of my clients to create, and generally we do. That's kind of the first exercise. But after that, I think there needs to be less of a focus on you jumping in front of a camera and saying, here's why you need to consider a Roth IRA, or here's why you need to consider a Roth conversion, or here's why you need to be doing this or doing that. And like, talking at the prospect. What I would love to see more advisors do is share more of the raw conversation, not necessarily with clients, but maybe you jumped off the phone with a client or jumped off the meeting with the client, and you're feeling you've got it's right there in your memory, like it's fresh, and you just turn the camera on. You're like, hey guys, I just wanted to share this. I just jumped off with a client, and I know so many of you are probably thinking this, but I want you to know that it's totally normal. And then you share a bit of that high level conversation you had, right? And you're obviously respectful of names and age and demographics and all those things, so that that client can feel like, or if that person ever sees that video, they know it's not them, right? But my point is creating content based on the actual conversations and the actual questions that come up will be the most consumable and relatable content.
Yeah, I can totally see that. When it comes to, some of the, again, industry stalwarts, the big engines that are moving the industry, do you see anyone that is kind of stepping up and leaning into this at all, or is it all come down to grassroots and advisors at this point?
I'm waiting for the day, and I use them as an example all the time because their marketing is flashy and fun, but I'm waiting for the day for BlackRock to figure it out. And when they do, we'll see a waterfall of everyone else scrambling to copy. Because, when BlackRock really rebranded themselves 10 or 15 years ago with all the shapes and colors and everything, every other firm did the same thing. And they generally have their finger on the pulse as far as corporate big whale marketing goes. But no, as far as consumable content, I don't think any of the giants are doing it at all. I don't think they're focused on it. I think if you and I dove into this on the last conversation we had, and I encourage everybody to watch that, because that was a fun one, because I think inside of the corporation is what stops them from doing it. The politics behind career moves and people feeling like if someone suggested that in the corporate ladder, they'd probably be laughed at and not be up for the next job, right? And that's what holds these firms back. So that's a totally separate conversation. But answering your question simply, no one's doing it, and why is a topic for another day.
And some of it just comes down to, what are you going to do for me today? Like, I need to see results. I need, something to happen. And this kind of goes into, consistency. If I'm trying to measure metrics and try to analyze and look at the impact that I'm making, it obviously takes time. I need to be consistent. What is in your mind prior to even, maybe bringing on an end client, which is obviously the end goal, or at least retaining existing clients? What are some ways to try to realistically measure the impact that you might be making in terms of again, a simpler, easier message that's consumable by the ideal client that you're looking for?
I mean, I measure it by conversations, right? How many conversations are you generating, period, right? Is it more or less than when you began marketing? If it's more, then what you're doing is probably working. If it's less, then what you're doing is probably not working. And that is about as simple as I can make it. Now, on top of that, I would layer patience. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes 3 to 6 months to really start to work. It also includes all the variables I talked about. Have you been consistent? Have you applied the proper creative? Are you consumable? It's all the different ways of, measuring how it works is easy for me. It's, are you generating more conversations? Then the next question is, why is it or isn't it working?
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of the people in our community know you and your services. We hopefully are going to be continuing to reach out to a wider audience. If somebody is looking to get in touch with you, Corey, what's the best way for them to get in touch? And if you can maybe just give a real quick idea of what that process looks like in terms of what you've described. And I like how you go into your who, what, why, and where. Each individual is going to be different, but what does that process look like? If you can real quickly spell that out, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I mean, get in touch with me is easy. Just find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a DM, Corey Keating. I mean, I'm probably, you'll recognize me. There's not too many out there that'll Corey Keating that'll look like me. So that's the easy thing, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn and we'll chat. As far as you're looking for what the first conversation might look like with an FA
Yeah.
consultation client.
Yeah. So, I mean, so, somebody, again, the people that know you and I mean, that have been around, I mean, there's just having you on this week. I heard from several people like, oh, love Corey. I love what he's doing. So I think you've built a brand for yourself, right? And you're known, but there's also a lot of noise out there. And it's like, you could be grouped in with everybody else. Like what makes you different in terms of how you engage with advisors, Corey?
That's fun. I mean, look, I've told you this in the past, and I always enjoy these conversations because I think you're a good host. So, give yourself a pat on the back for that. Look, I'm not for everybody, and I shouldn't be for everybody. And your audience and advisors are not for everybody, right? I see some familiar names here watching, and I'm sure that others will watch this on a post-production recording. You can't be for everybody. You have a ideal client in mind, or a subset of ideal clients that you want to work with. So there are folks out there that I would love to work with, but frankly, maybe our personalities don't jive, or someone might not be as willing to be as open or as patient as I need them to be. But the clients that I really enjoy working with recognize that they're willing to come to the table and show their cards and say, look, it just isn't working for me. And typically what this looks like is, it looks like an advisor that has had some success. They've plateaued. They've kind of reached a point in their career or their business that it's comfortable. They can provide a living and a roof over their head and everything, but they want to grow, and they haven't, and they've stalled, and they don't know how to get to that next level. And the world's changed a little bit, right? It's a lot more competitive marketing wise, right? So they call and we talk, and I sit down with them, and I could use you as an exercise here, John. I'd say, what do you have? What do you have in place right now? What does someone find when they Google you? What does someone find when they go to your LinkedIn profile? When they go to YouTube? What do they find out about you on their own? Okay, you tell me, we go through that. That's kind of your current foundation, right? And then I'm like, what's your activity look like? How often? Who are you talking to? Show me, let's see, let's take a look at what you're doing. And you got to be honest, and this stuff's public. I can find it, right? You can't bullshit me. I see that you maybe don't post on LinkedIn as often as you should. And I see that your YouTube channel is maybe a little bit more boring than it needs to be. And I'm not talking about you specifically, John. I'm just, that this is kind of the conversation that we have, where I see that your website is good, but hasn't, you've got this blog feature that hasn't been touched in 3 years, and it looks like a ghost town kind of thing, right? So we have just that honest conversation about what are you doing? Where are you at? Who are you trying to get in front of? Okay, well, maybe your audience isn't on LinkedIn, right? That's a tough one for a lot of people. Maybe that niche audience you want to focus on, unfortunately, it's tough. They're spending a lot of time on Facebook. Or you work at a captive firm and you can't be as aggressive as you'd like to be in marketing. Okay, well, we have to get around that. How are we going to do that? Are we going to do that through the more of the traditional mediums of print? Like, are we going to do webcasts? Like, what are we going to do? So very long-winded way of saying, when I meet with a client, we have that kind of bottom-up conversation. What are you up to? What are you doing? Where's your audience? How are you getting in front of them? And we take it from there.
Good stuff. Well, we will open up now to the community to take some feedback and questions from everyone else. Corey, thanks so much for joining us this week. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And let's, as I don't know how long you want to keep this thing running, and if questions come in, I'm happy to answer them, but I'd love to, you and I could poke at this, as well. Like, what do you struggle with, John? How are you getting in front of a wider audience? What's on your mind as far as marketing?
Well, I'm going to open it up here and we'll see if we can get others, but I'm happy to be the guinea pig if we don't. So we'll see.
Stop looking at me. Says.
No, I'll do it. All right, everybody, feel free to jump in if you want.